Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to my website. I'm Joseph77 and I'm making this recording impromptu on Saturday the 23rd of October 2022. At present moment in time, the country is seeking for a new Prime Minister, and the Conservative Party's greatest fear is that of an impending general election which they want to avoid at all costs. I believe I can show them that this is the very thing which they can enact, not because they feel it constitutionally as their duty, but morally as an act of courage to show the country that they value the future of Britain more than themselves. By avoiding a general election, they are saying we want to protect the Conservative Party. By having a general election, they're saying we're prepared to sacrifice ourselves as a party so that the country can find security and a stable future. Now, how I can propose a future general election with or without myself as a future Prime Minister is to look very carefully at all that I published and conveyed in all my websites. Let me put it very, very simply, firstly in biblical language, so that you can see how it translates into our present circumstance. In biblical language, I'm saying we are now at the similar stage when Moses stepped down from his leadership role and gave the leadership role to Joshua. And Joshua was the person whom, when God spoke to Moses in the tent, face to face, Joshua was also invited. Meaning Joshua understood all the laws that the Almighty God wanted Israel to understand through Moses. By abdicating, the symbolic sign was achieved to say to the people of Israel, God has been satisfied with all the laws he downloaded across this journey, so that you can now step into the promised land and start building the nation of Israel under Joshua's leadership. Now, how that translates, ladies and gentlemen, into our present circumstance is very simple, but extremely challenging. The journey which God inspired Britain, Europe and America for the past 2,000 years, which the Church did not see coming, was firstly a definitive expression of the relationship between humanity and Christ, which began with the Reformation, which led to the Protestant faith and the birth of the Church of England. A definitive expression of that was in the three books, the King James Bible, the Book of Common Prayer and the Great Hymns of Christendom. Those three books created religious consciousness within the orbit of the creation of Western civilization. The three books in actual fact did a very simple thing. They allowed the Almighty to reside in the presence, in the midst of Western civilization through the Christian Church, whether it be Roman Catholic, Protestants or the Church of England and all the other free churches. But I speak specifically to the Church of England. Now, the outer perimeter, so to speak, of Western civilization is, of course, the intelligence created through the inspiration of art and science. God did not overrule free will. The free will of humanity at the time grappled with darkness, with ignorance. God quickened the thinking process through the three faculties of memory, imagination and reason, and that input of inspiration in which God touched, so to speak, these three faculties, and it created the two greatest inspirational forces that humanity has ever known, that is the Renaissance to denote great art, and the Enlightenment to denote great reason and thinking, which led to science. Now those two combined created the colonial era, and the British Empire was the most illustrious and significant illustration of what the Almighty achieved theologically, which the Church has not recognized, which I, as the future Pope, will make clear to the Christian Church. This is what happened in this period. The downloading of art and science alludes to what was intended in the Eden of Genesis, when Adam was given the gift of comprehension to service, the call to duty. In Genesis 2:19, the writer goes on record on behalf of the Creator to say, "Let us see what Adam will call what we have created." And because Adam gave the correct names, it means Adam understood what the Almighty had created, meaning the Almighty met with his responsibility to ensure Adam received this gift of comprehension in order to be a proficient custodian of Eden, which was actually the chosen abode of the Almighty. So if you think of Eden as a house in which we live, the builders build the house, make it serviceable for a person to live in, with all the infrastructure, water, gas, electricity, etc. Now this is what happened in Western civilization. It created modernity. This definitive course of action ended in the same way that the journey across the desert ended under Moses' authority. When God was satisfied, he downloaded all the laws for Israel to comply with, to ensure that they would become fit for purpose to enter the promised land and begin the process of nation building under Joshua's leadership. But that only happened because Moses stepped down from his leadership role under divine decree, so that all the Israelites can be empowered with the belief, the inspiration, the knowledge and the vision. Yes, thank you, Moses, for stepping down. We understand. Now we are ready to enter the promised land and begin the process of nation building, which Egypt subjected us under the tyranny of darkness. But across this desert, now we are at the stage when Joshua can lead us forth into the promised land. This is the exact position that any Prime Minister chosen will need to grasp the magnitude of what is at hand. We're not just talking about fiscal measures to deal with the cost of living, as important as that is. We're not talking about the war in Ukraine, as important that is to deal with. We're not talking about Brexit, which had the tick but not the small print, etc, etc, etc. What I can do, ladies and gentlemen, is give you that big vision, that overall strategy, which can then command all the talents in the cabinet and in the two political parties and the other smaller parties. What I'm doing, ladies and gentlemen, is something outside the Westminster bubble, outside Parliament, even outside the country. I'm going back to show you what 2,000 years of history has now come to an end and what it means. As I said, for 20 years I wrote with respect, with dignity and with purpose and clarity, to Her Majesty the Queen why she needs to consider to conclude the hereditary monarchy. We now know that cannot be the case, but I think something even better is going to happen, can happen, may happen, and I believe will happen. And that is King Charles III can now consider to do exactly what his mother done by creating a roadmap which he can now follow, in which the end of that roadmap means to step down from the throne. By doing so, he will have acknowledged what Queen Elizabeth II's reign is meant to achieve, and that is to conclude the hereditary monarchy. This equates to what Moses did under divine decree, to step down from his leadership role so that Israel can be inspired to go forth and build the nation of Israel under Joshua's leadership. This time, Your Majesty, and I say this with the utmost of respect, reserve, dignity, and sense of duty to the country, to yourself, but most of all my sense of obedience to Almighty God, He's placed it on my shoulder and no one else to say this to Your Majesty. Queen Elizabeth II, your dear mother, our beloved Queen, has created a roadmap described in other talks, which you can now consider, sir, and no one is going to tell you what to do. But I am saying to Your Majesty, I believe this is something which you can consider. All I can do is be the messenger boy and pass this message as clearly as I can, as emphatically as I can, as cogently as I can, and as comprehensively as I can, what it is going to achieve. You're going to say to the whole world, I will step down from the throne so that the whole world can understand the modern world that we now live in is as a direct result of divine consecration, of divine intervention, and of divine patronage. It is also remarkable, Your Majesty, that your legacy in your family comes as a consequence of abdication. We all know what irony means. You can see, Your Majesty, the irony of what you can do which no other person on earth and no other monarch is given the privilege of doing. Something which actually is in more consequential to you as a person, Your Majesty. If you remain on the throne, we all know that you will be shackled. You will never be the person that we know and respect that you are a person who likes to voice his thoughts. You cannot do that as a monarch. You will be a prisoner of your own position. To free yourself is the very way that the Almighty has presented before Your Majesty. But I believe there is a future purpose for the royal family, and I believe the nation that will need your presence, Your Majesty, is to become Charles I of the United States of America. For this simple reason: such is the libertarian nature of this great nation that it can face its own internal combustion because of the terrible example that the previous President of the United States, whom I loathe, and I won't even mention his name, came close when his supporters stormed the very building which represents the freedom and the aspiration of the United States of America. It needs a voice, Your Majesty, which it can look up to and respect. You can do that, sir, in a way that no other person can do. It is out of the reach of any politician, but not within the grasp of Your Majesty. I will not say any more, sir, other than that. You're going to do so much, sir, in such a simple way. You'll give to Britain the vision that she needs outside of the political rhetoric. You will say to the country, what Britain achieved in the past is to be emulated, but not in its colonial aspiration. You can go into the world. Britain now has a vision, sir, which can say to all the nations, especially the nations of colour, you can say we understand why we were so blessed in that period called colonialism. We regret the things that we did wrong, but we are proud of the things that we did right. And we will now go forth with a new vision where the whole of the United Kingdom can say to each other, it is right to become independent of each other, because that is nation building, and that is what we need to do. And we should not fear Scottish independence. We should not fear Welsh independence, and we should advocate the struggling Irish people who suffered so much to also become independent. But we act in the likeness of the European Union as a single entity with each other's interests at heart. This will send a fabulous message culturally, intellectually, historically, which will fire up growth. I've not used that word because I want to identify what it is that I've achieved that is going to create growth. It is the understanding of what's happened in past 400 years, which we want to pass on to other nations by firstly lobbying the United Nations to become a nation-building corporation, so that we can channel all the experience of nation building, which is political, economic, industrial, educational, environmental, and so on and so forth, into this new institution, so that it can then spread its wings across other nations and say, here is the help that we are now going to give to despotic and underdeveloped nations, or even developing nations that feel they need extra help, politically, culturally, and economically. Here is where it will fire up immense growth in the economy, but it begins firstly with a theological growth, followed by a constitutional growth, which will empower political growth. And this is the mandate that can be imparted into the general election. And the party that can take advantage of this more than any other is the Conservative Party, because they have a legacy which goes back to this era. They understand this era. And if I can put it in a very simple way, long time ago the Conservative Party was rather like the Church of England at prayer. And there's a measure of truth in that. And if I can say this now, I have singularly shown leadership how the Church of England can reform itself structurally through those 3 books to create religious consciousness, the reform of the King James Bible, in terms of advocating 2 forms of language, of the personal and of the traditional. That is inspired by due liturgy to change the autocratic singularity of the Book of Common Prayer to become an indigenous liturgy. So we go from autocracy to democracy, where I've created a personal version of the liturgy and then a corporate version of the liturgy, which creates a link with the past, so that we can establish in the present and inspire us for the future, which the great Edmund Burke advertised that conservatism is a contract between the dead, the living, and those yet to be born. The reform of these 3 books, which also includes the hymn book, my wonderful 100 grandchildren that I have, and 12 children, all new hymns which reflect the images of the past, which exactly it does what we need to do when we go forth in this nation building exercise, when we can all be independent nations, but we reflect the values which were created in the past, and the values that I believe that can inspire the people, British people, in order to maintain the heart of a society that is both responsible, that is both creative, and that is both forward looking, can be inspired by that sense of reserve, the sense of duty, and the sense of I've lost for words now, that experience in the past when people were deferential. I believe all these lessons that the great British people achieved and exercised can be reinterpreted, if I may say, in the new era that we are now at, which is outside of the political bubble, but must be implemented in the political system. I acknowledge that. But the present situation needs a figure that can command the understanding of the past and how it can be passed into the future, into the hands of politicians. And I believe you need such a figure, and for all the inadequacies that I possess and recognise, I can only do so much, but I believe it would do much for many. How I can conclude this, ladies and gentlemen, in a coherent way. As I said, I'll go back to my initial example of what was achieved through Moses. Moses led the Israelites out of the bondage of Egypt into the promised land only because the Almighty downloaded the laws that he wanted Israel to comply with, to make Israel fit for purpose to enter the promised land under Joshua's leadership. The present scenario, ladies and gentlemen, is for the king to abdicate in order to give a clear signal to the British people and the Christian church, not only the Church of England, but the whole of Christianity and Western culture, which includes America, that we have reached a definitive stage of all the lessons learnt in the past 2,000 years, culminating in the end of the British Empire. And thanks to the roadmap created by Queen Elizabeth II, we can consider that the constitutional conclusion to the hereditary monarchy is the iconic symbolic act which will inspire Britain into a new era. And whoever that person mean, not myself, I don't mind, so long as I've done my duty to convey the message, then I believe Britain is on an immense new era which can also inspire our surrounding nations of the European Union and of the United States of America. all the fiscal measures which can be taken under afterwards can be given a new perspective, and the nation can have great strength in this new belief in this new era, which will create unity in the country because it has a vision. At the moment, we understand without guidance a nation falls. Where there is no vision, a nation perish. We are not going to perish. We're such a great nation, but I believe we are at stagnation. We do need leadership. We do need vision. We do need inspiration. We do need help. So, ladies and gentlemen, may I conclude? I hope I've conveyed myself coherently that the Conservative Party does not need to fear a general election. It is in fact the very thing that is going to unite the nation first. Then the Conservative Party can align itself politically to serve the nation, rather than try and unify the party because it has no vision. It needs to see that the country has a vision. Then it can unite itself to serve the British people. That way round, I believe, will create a new era for the Conservative Party. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope my short talk comes across coherently, with purpose and with inspiration. Thank you.